Simon's ready. Cheers.
Cheers. All right, so today we're going to take it a little bit easier with our P-Lap episode here. And, you know, as a coach, I really just wanted to kind of like hit the brakes.
You're going to put the clutch in?
I'm going to put the, I'm going to put the clutch in and kind of talk about some of the things we're working on and some of the common themes. And along with this, I think a lot of you viewers, don't worry, you're going to get plenty of riding today. We're going to be showing a lot of footage. But I think a lot of viewers are going to have a lot of epiphanies today, because really the things that you're struggling with, you're not struggling with them at a level that's causing you to crash, but you're struggling with them at a level that's making you slower or making you unable to hit jumps the way you want to, like getting style in the air, things like that. So I really just wanted to have this discussion and look at some footage, which we've chosen out and we've looked at. And it's really going to give us this idea of how we want to move forward, you know, as we continue this series. And also, I think, as I said, it's going to give riders a lot of epiphanies about maybe where they went wrong, how they caused a crash, or why they're not getting style in the air, or maybe why they're not moving as quickly down the trail as they would like to. And one of the things we get from a lot of viewers online is saying like, hey, can you address Friday fails? Can you talk about that? And, you know, we might at some point start to address some of those crashes, but I can just address them right now. People get too far back, right? People get their hips back way before drops and they get yanked forward by their own extended arms. People get back too far on jumps and they have no space left in their arms in the air to allow for the arc, and they get pulled forward. They basically get bucked, and they also overload their rear suspension by being too far back.
Right, and why you sometimes come into a corner and you just feel like you have to hit the brakes.
Yeah, or why you come into a corner sometimes and you wash the front end out.
That never happens.
Never. And the reason we would wash out in a corner like that is because if we're so far back, we have to hand steer because our hips actually can't turn. But we'll get to that in a minute. Where would you like to start today? Because I know this is haunting you in a number of different elements of your riding.
Well, it's funny because I feel like when I think about all the lessons and the key takeaways for the majority of our episodes, it's generally drive your knees forward, get more forward, and that has applied to so many different skills. Nice. So I want to start with jumping because that's kind of where my head's at right now. It's been a long, cold, sloppy winter, and I haven't done a ton of jumping, and now that it's drying out a little bit, at home at least. Here it's already dry, but it's time to get this jumping game sorted out.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I really like some of the practice clips you've been showing me lately, and you know, to speak just briefly about one of our other instructors, Chris Severns. I was coaching him right before he started teaching for me. I was doing a class with him, and he was hitting some really steep face jumps, which is what you're trying to do now, which is what you are doing now. You're hitting steep face jumps. And we were working down at the bottom of Flying Squirrel, and he wasn't able to get style in the air, and he was also being pulled forward at the end of his flight arc. And the reason for that was that his arms were getting too extended. And so we actually had to get him making some movement in the air so that he wouldn't get so extended. And within just a couple of hours, we had him creating super good style off the jumps. And that's really where we're trying to head with you. We're trying to get you up in the air, and not just a good arc, but with the ability to freely move your body in the air. And because you have that tendency to kind of slide back, that extends your arms and keeps you from making movement in the air. So you start to get a straighter flight. And you're also not getting quite as high an arc, you know, like a natural arc that matches the pitch of the jump.
Mm-hmm. Well, since I had mostly ridden on more shallow face jumps, it just hadn't occurred to me that I need to keep driving forward even more on a steep face jump. And that concept of staying perpendicular to sea level, it makes sense, but it's really hard to do in practice. And so when we started recently hitting these steeper face jumps, I realized how far off I was in my technique.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something, you know, every time we do an advanced jump clinic, I go around and ask people kind of, hey, you know, what's holding you back? What are your strong suits? What's holding you back? And everybody says the same thing: steep face jumps, you know, because you're riding toward it and it looks like you're running into a wall, right?
Yeah.
And that's intimidating, and it's so intimidating that it's really hard to lean into it, to like really drive the knees in, and again, to maintain that stance pretty much perpendicular to sea level, because that's really what's going to allow you to make the arc. And part of what feels different there is that because the jump is so steep, we're standing perpendicular to sea level, and the handlebars are moving closer to our body, and we're used to them kind of staying at a set distance from our body. So suddenly it's like, wait a minute, what are the handlebars doing in my lap?
Right. So what's fun about this is that I have not cracked this code yet. I've made progress, but I still have a long way to go. And having looked back at one of the episodes we filmed maybe 5 weeks ago, pretty recently, I'm on Luna line, which is the green jump line. And we have this footage in an episode, and my hips are way back, and it's not even a steep face jump. And so having watched that, I had to go back, and that just recently I've been practicing just on the green line how to keep my body forward and my knees forward on that.
You know, something that comes to mind for me, and I think this will resonate with a lot of viewers, is I think the reason that you're getting back on a green run on jump runs is because of what you say about your jumping. I'm not a good jumper, right? So we have this in our head. You're like, oh, I'm a good technical rider. So you're much more aggressive about moving into technical terrain. But because you think you're not a good jumper, there's some hesitancy that's built into your mind, which then translates into your body. And so I think that's a big thing. And as you're moving forward, you're starting to realize like, oh, maybe I can jump, right? And so then as your mind gets stronger and you're reinforcing that with proper movement, you're going to find that you make huge gains with your jumping.
Mm-hmm. Well, so what was fun though, my bike was being worked on for a few days, so I whipped out the old dirt jumper, which is generally a decoration in my garage, but it had wheels and it rolled, so I took it out, and being able to feel the jumps through the lens of the dirt jumper was actually kind of helpful. So I got a steep face jump on the dirt jumper, and then I went back on my bigger bike and had to recreate that motion on a big squishy bike. And I feel like for the first time ever, I'm finally starting to feel it. Jason keeps talking about this float moment, and I want to get there. I don't think I've gotten there yet. We're gonna deliver this, and hopefully later we'll have an episode of me actually
getting the float moment. And it's in that float moment where you're completely free to move in the air. So if you don't feel that floating moment, you're probably going to be just a little bit stiff in the air. So that's really where the style happens, is during that floating moment.
And that's another thing I've noticed in the last few weeks, because I think, okay, spring is here, it's time to, well, spring's almost here. It's time to get this jumping game on.
Spring is here.
Spring is here in Baja. It is coming to Seattle. So I noticed I would film a run several times just trying to hit the jumps correctly. And then as soon as I tried to add in even a little bar turn, it all reverted back. So I've got some muscle memory to train.
Yeah, it's really important. I mean, one of the key things that helps you get that movement in the air again is that when you are standing perpendicular to sea level coming up the jump face, that collects your arms in so that when the bike flies up, you still have some elbow bend so you can actually move the bike. And I think that's really what's going to start allowing you to create the style in the air that you're looking for.
Yeah, it has been an interesting progression, and I see this so much when I watch jumping at Doothy, where people start to get bucked a little bit because they're a little bit far back, and because they're getting bucked, then they kind of revert to a drop technique and they get back even further. So they create this vicious cycle of getting back further and creating a problem and then trying to put a Band-Aid on that problem versus solving it by moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, it happens on all kinds of terrain. Somebody has a scary experience where they're pulled forward, and the natural reaction is to get back, because if you don't understand what's pulling you forward, you think getting back more is going to help you, but it's really the getting back that's caused the problem in the first place.
Yep, and again, looking back on some old photos, I guess I was using the drop technique off of jumps, and no wonder it took me so long to start to develop some confidence.
Yeah. So other than jumping, what's on your mind in terms of things that are giving you a bit of grief, or places maybe you've improved?
So this is actually my favorite one, because we're here in Baja, and Baja has a lot of loose, dry corners. So not only are they challenging, we don't get a lot of practice on this type of terrain at home. Yeah. So my favorite one is actually cornering, because I was so far back on my bike when I was cornering that I'd just come in and I would kind of hand steer a little bit, and because this ground is so loose and unforgiving, it would just wash out and I'd be down. Absolutely,
yeah. I mean, anytime we get back, what happens is we're pushing our hips back. So in that moment, we're not able to rotate our hips. So we can no longer body steer. We're basically going to be forced to steer from the handlebars, and that's, especially in these loose conditions, is going to cause a washout. And I would actually say that's the number one thing when I'm teaching my cornering classes, that people go, oh my gosh, I can corner so much better now. And it's just getting them to drive forward enough to where the knee is over the toe. And that's a super helpful thing for a lot of riders. And for you, I think that's probably, in terms of your race times, I would say that's probably the number one place, the number one element that's going to change your race times. It's going to make you faster down the trail and more confident, especially when you don't have absolutely perfect dirt.
Yeah. Well, and it was fun, right? Because we did the slalom drill a couple weeks ago. And the more the bike wanted to drift, the more I was driving my knees forward and getting more front tire traction. And it felt so good knowing that as soon as my bike started to get loose, I had a solution for it.
Yeah, and it's the opposite solution that you applied before.
Yeah.
Instead of running away, now you're starting to move in. So your brain is starting to process the fact that the fight or flight mechanism is not helping you on jumps. It's not helping you in turns. And so what's starting to happen is in the moment that that's happening, your brain automatically is starting to reassess and go, oh no, moving forward is the thing to do, right? And I think that's really where riders need to get to with their riding, is to practice this enough that your brain's response to protect your body becomes the correct response, because the fight or flight mechanism isn't actually helpful in those moments. You know, getting too tense or retreating and getting back.
Yeah. Well, and even it seems simple now, but understanding how the bike works and understanding that driving your knees forward over your toes creates more front tire traction is something that I just hadn't heard of before we started doing this. To me, it didn't make, I guess I didn't think about the fact that where my knees were in relation to my toes changed the way the suspension worked.
Absolutely. I mean, really what we're looking for is to get that fork to compress, and that was something we worked with in our slalom drill, was putting our travel markers down and then making sure that we're actually getting really good front fork usage, because it's the suspension's job to keep the tire on the ground more importantly than it is for it to absorb bumps. So we want to be riding in a situation within a turn where we're inside our suspension, where the suspension's partway compressed, so we still have room to absorb a bump, but more importantly, we have compression in the suspension so that the fork can reach and the shock can reach and allow the tire to stay tracking on the ground.
Well, and then you think about the off-camber stuff we did, and going over some of those routes and having your knee over your toe and the compression through the front fork meant that if I did hit a route, that the bike had somewhere to go without just washing out.
Absolutely. No, it's really important. And the other thing about this is, if we get back too much in that situation, we're not over our legs in a way where our leg can go out. Okay, so also just staying centered over the body, centered over the bottom bracket, allows the leg to reach a lot more effectively. So we actually have two suspension systems, the bicycle and the body. And when we start to use those together, it's a lot more powerful.
Yeah. Well, cornering's just a lot more fun now, because before it was, you'd come in really hot and you hit the brakes, or you weren't sure what was going to happen, you wash out. I used to slide out on my elbows all the time, and I didn't have a solution for it. I didn't know what I could do differently.
Yeah.
But now I feel like, okay, it's actually pretty simple. Yeah. Drive forward more.
Drive forward more. And and that's the hardest thing to do when you're in steeper ground or more slippery ground. I remember getting out of my car at I think Tiger Mountain one day, and somebody came up to me and said, like, hey, be careful out there. It was a really rainy day, and they're like, be careful out there. Don't put any weight on your front wheel. And I just remember somebody giving me that advice, and I thought, I don't think that's very good advice. There was somebody who had obviously had trouble washing out that day and thought it was because they put too much weight on the front wheel, but most likely it was quite the opposite.
Yeah. Oh, I love the unsolicited coaching advice.
Yeah, it's always good to get.
You should have her pedal off the edge of that drop. It'll keep her front wheel up. That's awesome.
Your cornering has come a long way, that's for sure. You're getting a lot faster in all kinds of turns. You're falling down a lot less, which is nice. What else has been important for you?
The other big awakening moment for me was for steep descents, where it's so easy to get pulled off the back of the bike, especially when you have kind of undulating steep descents, where you have these moments where your body should be shifting back and forth, but you just kind of get pulled progressively off the back. Yeah. And a lot of those, especially in the PNW, end in a turn. And by the time you get to the turn, if you're pulled all the way off your bike and you're hanging off the end of it, you just can't make the corner. Yeah,
you're going to wash out. Yeah, that's really important. I mean, I would say, like, in terms of what I see with people, jumping and steep descents are the two most dangerous places and maybe drops where people get back too much too soon. And I think that's really what keeps people in fear about steep descents, because they have a situation where they go over the handlebars and they think, oh yeah, I'm not very good at steep descents, and really their body position's just been incorrect. And there's also just a lot of old information out there to kind of like get your butt back for a steep descent. And while the bike does move forward underneath us and the saddle might appear in front of us and it looks like we're back, essentially the bike has moved out in front of us. We should still be standing over the bottom bracket. And I think that's probably the number one place where you can create more safety and control over your bicycle when you're standing over the middle of your bicycle. But you can also create the ability to get enough confidence to start to move into those sections a lot more quickly.
And the other thing with that Braveheart episode, I guess it was episode 1, and we've revisited it in 2. So right at the beginning, for me, it was really helpful to understand that you should approach that steep descent standing tall, so that you could, once you get to, I guess, the lip or the start of that steep descent, you could move into it versus coming in crouched and then you have nowhere to go.
Exactly. And, that's, along with being too far back, that's the number one, I would say the number 2 mistake that the general population makes, and that you are making with your riding, is to just be like, oh, I need to be in attack position all the time. Attack position's momentary. It's just like this moment that happens, and it's only powerful because you're coming from somewhere, So a good example of that is watching, like you and Jason moving through undulating terrain, like in that Predator episode, where he's really tall, like just full height in between, and then he's just like over the bars and then pressing back down back to full height. And you're coming in a little bit low, and because of that, you run out of leg travel and you actually get compression and get a bit of air, right? So you're not actually able to keep the bicycle on the ground to do passive pumping, or if you were active pumping, you're not going to get quite as much strength and pressure by pushing through your legs because you're already standing a little bit low.
Yeah, and I think in that footage we'll also see that my hips were pretty far back, and so there are kind of a couple factors, and I guess I should get back there and try that.
Yeah, definitely time for a revisit of that one. That ability to stay up over your legs, to be tall in between things, also gives you the ability to press in. I think when I first started coaching you, I Googled your stuff, I went online, I saw a couple follow cam footage, clips of you. And I just was like, I think I told you this at our first, at the end of our first session, I was like, yeah, you've got like one suspension setting on your legs. And a lot of that is because of your position, and a lot of that is in 2 ways. Your position being too far back, and your position being too low on the bike.
I had no power down there.
You had no power.
I felt safe, but I had no power through my legs.
And like in your slalom, that really came in now, where you're standing taller and you've got a lot more ability to press down through the legs.
But when I met you, I didn't even dip feet in corners, so I was just flat for everything.
Yeah.
No wonder I couldn't ride a flat corner.
Yeah.
I lost races because of that.
Yeah, it makes it pretty difficult, that's for sure.
Yeah. So it's that, the passive pumping and that undulating terrain just has given me a lot of confidence, and it's fun because that was the area that I felt like I was most proud of coming into this, that was steep descents, and to know that there was still so much room for improvement. The best thing for me is I get feedback constantly now. Before something would go wrong, I may not know why, and you just kind of carry on and maybe come in a little more shy next time. I'm getting all these messages from my bike and from my body without having to crash to learn that lesson. So I get a lot of these like micro feedback moments.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's also helping your featuring. It's helping all kinds of stuff. Your ability to like pop off terrain because your legs are more underneath you. You got a lot more strength. So yeah, there are a lot of places this is really starting to pay off.
I always liked riding bikes, but it's changed having these skills and developing skills and knowing that every little time I go out, whatever kind of terrain I'm on, even if I'm on a paved road, just scooting down to my house or something, I can learn something. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I always say, vertical is a terrible thing to waste.
Never waste it down.
So yeah, never waste it down. You'll make some turns, practice your manuals, do whatever it is you can.
Right.
Anything else that you wanted to cover for today in terms of techniques?
I don't think so. I feel like, did you have something in mind?
No, for me, I think the interesting thing in having been in going through this process with you is seeing how the same couple of mistakes is manifesting in so many different ways. Because it's not like you're getting inside foot pressure. It's not like you're making some of the really obvious mistakes. it's just this like kind of desire to get back, this desire to get low. And some of that comes from moments of where you lack confidence, and what you find is that as you start to get taller, as you start to press in more, as you start to stand with knees over toes, the confidence comes, and then you can continue to build those techniques to an even higher and higher level.
Well, that's a great point too about standing tall, because that's what I'm trying to do in jumping, and that's what I was trying to do in slalom.
Yeah, and remember, we can't really stand tall if our hips are back, right? And we can't really keep our hips where they should be if we're standing too low.
Yeah.
Because that makes our hips go back.
I like to think about where would I need to be over my bike if I didn't have handlebars.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about things. Is like, obviously don't let go of your handlebars when you're on like a technical trail, but if you feel like you're like just hanging onto your handlebars really, too tightly all the time, you're not truly balanced over your feet, and that's an excellent indication. And that's one of those things, like you said, you're getting feedback from your bike, you're getting feedback from your body. And as you start to kind of identify these ways in which you can process this feedback and make adjustments from it, it's just going to continue to elevate your riding.
Yeah.
So it's been super cool to work with you. We've got a lot more work to go, but I feel like we're making amazing progress, and hopefully some of these things are going to resonate with our viewers. And I know they resonate with you, and I know they are certainly the things that I'm working on and Jason's working on with you, to really get you in the position on the bike to become an even more powerful rider.
Yeah, no, it's already paid off so much, and I feel like the next couple months are going to be even more transformative, and hopefully I'll get that style I've always wanted. We'll see.
It'll come.
Yep. Sweet. Well, thanks so much. Thanks
You're
for doing
welcome.
this recap with me. It's helpful.